Hello YouTube. So as promised, we will give you a video of things that you do not want to see when you pick your car up from the shop after it is LS swapped. So this car here was brought to me from a customer. He had it at another shop, or a person, whatever you want to call it, because he took the car, they did a frame off. I really use that term loosely. They took the frame off, cleaned it up, put all new suspension, and LS swapped it. It has a Holley Terminator X Max because it has a 4L80 in it, a 4L80E in it. It has I think a Quick Performance 9-inch in it, and I'm not sure what brand all the suspension is. I haven't had the car up on the hoist yet, and I'm really not in a rush to, because I'm sure I'm gonna find a lot more stuff wrong with it there as well. A quick thing that I did notice about the suspension work is that everything isn't tight. If I get down up in here, you can see how where that control arm meets the mount, the bolt is not all the way tight because there is space there. So typically there would be shims here after the alignment was done, but this car was not aligned. They just dropped it off back to the customer after they did all the suspension work and didn't align it, which is kind of pointless because there's no point in putting all brand new suspension, wheels and tires, coilovers, all that stuff on a car and not aligning it. But that's what you get when you deal with amateurs. So some of the quick things that I want to point out. This battery cable. This battery cable here is appropriately sized for the positive cable. But we're going to get down here and get a quick look at this negative cable. This is very bad. You should have at least a 2-aught cable that goes from your engine directly to your battery, directly to your negative terminal. And then I typically give a 6-gauge wire to the, no, excuse me, not a 6-gauge, but I would typically do like an 8-gauge wire here to the battery. And then I would run like a 1-gauge cable down to the frame. You should not have this. It should not be this small cable here. This, well, I ain't gonna really call it small. It's a decent size. But this battery cable here, then running down to the frame here. And then all they did was get like a cable from like AutoZone or something, because this is for a side post battery. I'm assuming that they scraped some paint off theirs, and then they ran it down there, and then the engine ground is it looks a little bit smaller than this cable here. That is a big time no-no. And you can look right here and see the ground cable is still just another side post battery cable. So you should be making battery cables for the application. So that's on the battery side. It appears that the Holley wires are ran directly to the battery. I'm pretty sure this is a power for the, a ground for the Holley system, and this is the power right here. So that is good. Another thing that I noticed is this car here has a heater core in it. And I asked the customer, I said, well, you didn't want heat? He said, yeah, I wanted heat. But so instead of running your 2 ports off of your water pump here, up here to the heater core here, they just looped it around, which is good that you loop it, because you never want to block these two off. You definitely want these two to have flow. But if you have a heater core in your car, why not have heat? You have the option to have heat right here. So since we're right here, we're going to talk about this accessory belt setup here. Now, from a quick view here, it looks good. But the closer you get, you see the problem. So this is the water pump pulley here. And if you see, this water pump pulley is not really the correct one for this style, like aftermarket pulley setup. And the reason for that being is because instead of either running a spacer, where you can get spacers that bolt up back behind the water pump and space the water pump out appropriately, so you can line up with your harmonic balancer, your power steering pump, your alternator and everything. instead of putting spacers or getting the correct water pump, what you can see what they did is they took their power steering puller and just pulled it out some. You see, that is not correct, because this belt is now riding towards the edge of that pulley, and I would not want to do that. I would want to do it correctly. So where are we at? So we talked about the belt routing, talked about the ground cable, the fact that the heater core should have been hooked up, unless the heater core was leaking. But then, I mean, if the heater core was leaking, you just put a heater core in the car. You know, you tell the guy, hey, you owe me some more money, I put a heater core in the car, because you're going to want to have heat. So that's that. Another thing that I don't personally like is, like I say, this car has a Holley Terminator X Max. These are offshore injectors. I looked them up, and there's some place called Most Parts Plus. So I guess it's like an offshore aftermarket replacement injector for some type of car. So I don't really know exactly. I ohmed them out, and it does appear to be a high impedance injector, which is good, because you need to do that with the Holley systems. The Terminator X Max, they only use a high impedance injector. A low impedance injector will damage the system. So, but the problem is, if you don't have injector data for this injector, you're not able to put that into the Holley system so it can control it correctly. And one major problem I have is that this guy, he bought some stuff. The guy who, the customer bought some stuff. The guy who did the work bought on some stuff. And I have no paperwork for nothing. Like none. Like, and that's just ridiculous. Like, I got a couple cars in here in my shop. And when I do a car, I take all the instructions and stuff after I've read them. And normally I'll put it like a torque converter in a car, because I'm probably putting a transmission in it. So I'll take my torque converter box, or you can see this car has a Holley Sniper on it. And I just take all my instructions, like my cam card, everything. I throw it all in the box. All of the accessories. I mean, this car's got AFR head, so we got that inside. All of that stuff, I give that back to the customer, because he or she will need it when they go to have their car repaired, or just for insurance purposes. You can prove, say, hey, not only do I have the receipts, but this is the paperwork and the stickers and everything. You need to know what exactly is in the car. So I don't have injector data for that. The customer doesn't have injector data for that. And of course, you know, the customer and the first mechanic or shop, or whatever you want to call them, they probably not having the best relationship right now. So the cooling system in this car, I do like it. He does have the steam port hooked up. You can run them other places, but it is really good to run it directly into the radiator. I do like that. He's got an overflow tank set up. The radiator is pretty big. I'm not a huge fan of using fans out of like other cars, but I guess they would work. I don't know, because like I say, the car came to me on a tow truck. It started up for a second and just died. And the customer told me that they dropped it off to him on a truck and trailer, and it started a few times and it wouldn't start up again. The starter does drag really, really bad. So I know the starter is bad. I hope the flywheel isn't messed up. I added this fuel pressure gauge here myself, because I wanted to see what kind of fuel pressure we had. So it did give me 60 pounds of fuel pressure, which is good. So now, since we're talking about the fuel system, let's talk about one thing that I noticed that I think that over time will potentially be a big hazard. This is your inlet line. There's no return line up here, which a lot of people will say you have to have a return line, and you do. You can do it some ways where you don't have to have the return line up here. It's kind of all personal preference, but you do need a return on the system at your fuel pressure regulator, so you can return that fuel back to the tank. It's good. This is nice line. I'm assuming it's an Earl's line. It looks like it, so it is. But it's ran through here where the factory fuel line would come through. Now, the factory fuel line is a metal line. And this is nylon braided line, not stainless steel or anything. So this thing is gonna rub there. And eventually, over time, this will rub and cut through here. So that is bad. I really don't want to see it like I'm that. He could have enlarged the hole a little bit bigger, or put some type of grommet, or firmly secured it right here to where it comes through so it's not moving and could possibly chafe through on the bottom of the frame there. So that's my issue with the fuel line there. Let me think, what else? So we talked about the injectors. We talked about the serpentine setup. We talked about the battery cable, the negative battery cable. Oh, okay. So let's go inside the car. The terminator was mounted up here underneath the dash, which is a good place to do it. You were not able to see the LEDs. You would have to pull all of this out to see them, as I did, because I wanted to check some things when I was trying to get this thing started. But one major thing that is really wrong, let's get in here. So let me pull this carpet back down. So you can see these wires are coming through that hole, and there is no grommet. This green wire is right up against the metal, and this is for, is it for the fuel pump? Yes, so this green wire is for your fuel pump. So this has got a nice amount of amperage going through here, and it's right up against metal. I made an Instagram post about this before. People, if you pass wires through metal, they need to be in a grommet, and the grommet needs to be the appropriate size. They make grommets this big to where you can have a grommet and have this thing mounted. So that is wrong. Also, another thing I don't like is, I wished he probably would have used the internal map sensor, because normally in low performance applications, I think that works out a lot better. Just using the internal map sensor, like when you get this in a box, it has a whole bunch of little adapters to where you can hook it up to the size that you have. Oh, some other things that I noticed. So I was able to get the car running after I sorted out a bunch of things. The tune was way off. I just inputted some injector data that I thought would work, because I think these are for like shit. I forgot what I realized what I believe they were for. But I was able to get it running. It ran horribly. This thing is supposed to be a 5.3, and it's got like I think a 600-inch lift camshaft with like 240 degrees of duration. It's a stock-headed motor, nothing else done to it but that cam. It does have head studs in it, so I don't know if they're ARP head studs or some aftermarket offshore junk. I haven't pulled the valve cover off. But one thing I want to point out, so they have this big 92 millimeter throttle body. This is a 3-bolt intake manifold. This is a 4-bolt throttle body. So they're using the adapter plate. But what I've found over time is these cheap throttle bodies, like even the low end ones that you get from Holley, this IAC port down here, see, yeah, that thing makes a horrible noise. I mean, the wind noise that you get from that at idle, and when like you accelerate, sounds like a banshee screaming. I mean, it's not a really pretty noise. So I really don't like using the lower end throttle bodies. I probably, in my opinion, I think the cam in this thing is too big. But we don't even know if that's what cam is really in it. We're just assuming off of what we were told. So I'm gonna pause this for a second and we're gonna have a quick conversation. Okay, so I've shown you the bad. Now let's talk about some of the good things that you do want to see when you pick your car up from being LS Swap. First off, the car should run. The car should idle. You should be able to drive the car, especially if you're using one of the Holley fuel systems. If you're using a Terminator X Max or just an X, the base calibrations in those systems, I have found over doing a few installations, they will get the car running and driving and idle. Now, tuning, I still recommend, but I'm a firm believer that the base calibrations in there are good enough to where that the car will idle, run, and drive. I've put like Holley systems on a lot of different cars. Even like the little small, like little sniper carburetors. I've ran those on 383s with like 11-to-1 and really radical camshafts, and it will still start the car. I've even put a Terminator LS system on a turbocharged car, and the car idled, ran, and started. We didn't beat on the car real hard because it still needed to be tuned, but it was enough to get the car to the dyno and get it tuned. So I strongly believe that if you set the system up correctly, you've wired the system correctly using very neat practices, good grounds, have a good charging system, and as well as you have a good fuel system, you have adequate fuel pressure, adequate flow, your return line isn't restricted, and you have the correct injector data in there, I really believe that the car should run and drive under its own power. You should be able to get this car to a tuning shop, a dyno shop, whichever you prefer. The second thing is you need to make sure that your cooling fan works. You're most likely gonna have an electric cooling fan. Make sure that when the car gets up to temperature, the fan kicks on and it's able to hold the temperature at operating temperature. Another thing is when you start the car should start relatively easy. You don't want to hear your starter dragging or the engine to sound like it's really labored to start up. I would start the car when cold and when hot. You want to take a look at your oil pressure gauge and make sure you have adequate oil pressure at cold start and after the engine reaches operating temperature. I believe the GM spec is still 10 pounds of oil pressure for every 1,000 RPM. So that's meaning that if you had 10 to 15 pounds of oil pressure at idle around 1,000 RPM, that is adequate. I believe that maybe you should see a little bit more, maybe at least like 20 PSI at idle when the engine is fully up to temperature. But if you did have 10 to 15, and that's what your engine was built off, strictly a standard spec, then that would be adequate as well. So we talked about it starting, running, the fan working. You want to get a look at your gauges. If you're using a Holley system, it'll read you oil pressure, temperature, and you can also get an airflow reading from your Holley system. If it has a handheld, you can see all of that there. But if you're not using that type of system and you're using a factory computer, you need to have a set of gauges in the car so you can see engine coolant temperature, oil pressure, and I would recommend that you have an air fuel gauge because that'll let you know how the engine is running as well. So those are general things that you want to look for. As well as one other very important thing, in my opinion. Whatever equipment that you brought or was provided by the shop, was purchased by the shop for your car, you need to get all of that, the reference material that came with it, as well as any extra accessories that came with that equipment. What I mean by owner's manuals, if it had like extra harnesses, extra little parts, you need to get all of that so you can have it for your records and your purposes. And also so you can read through that information and learn how the system is designed to work as well. Because we've all bought something and thinks that it should do X. But once we actually read the product information, we learn that it only does Y. So a lot of times we can be assuming that the car should do this, 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 and what was purchased was not designed to do that. So you as well need to get a good understanding of how the components in your car operate. And then you're probably not going to get a chance to do this until you pay your bill, and that's just so you don't drive off. Before you really get ready to leave, once the car is up to full operating temperature, I would just take it for a quick cruise up and down the block. I would not beat on the car or heavy accelerate or anything like that without the shop giving you an okay, because if it's a new engine, they may want you to break it in, or if it still needs to be tuned correctly, you could get into a range where it could detonate. So you want to go for a nice leisurely drive up and down the block. And you also need to learn from the shop is that, does it still have break-in engine oil in it? Is there a break-in period? Do they want you to take it easy for a week or so? Do they say that the car has to be tuned? You need to know that information before you leave. And also, I think it should be like a checkup time setup. I think maybe like once the car is tuned and everything is running good, maybe you should take it, go put 100 or 200 miles on it and bring it back into the shop so they can look over it to make sure it hasn't developed any oil leaks, fuel leaks, to make sure none of the wiring has moved. It may have fell out of a grommet or a holder or something like that, and the wire could be chafing, to make sure all the fuel lines are still secure, to make sure that the exhaust is still mounted securely, it's not creating an exhaust leak, that could be skewing your O2 sensor, having it think that the engine's running lean when it's not really, because you have a leak and now it's adding more fuel than it needs to be. I think a checkup time should be set up to where you can bring the car back in and they check over it to make sure everything is done. I'd say after about 200 miles, or unless you can't make the 200 miles if something else happens. So those are some of the things that you want to look for. Now let's touch on this paperwork here. The reason why the paperwork is very important is because even if they put a system in your car and when you left, it's running and driving good, I would still recommend that you take your car to someone who is familiar with the type of fuel injection control you have. If it's Holley, Motec, if it's a factory-based ECM, take it to a person who is familiar with that, and I would recommend the car gets tuned. Now, your tuner is going to need to know exact information about what is in your car. He or she will ask for your cam card. They will want to know the exact cubic inch of the engine. They will want to know if they aren't factory cylinder heads, what type of cylinder heads, what type of fuel injection system are you running, how much PSI is it supposed to be at, what size is the rear gear in the car. This is all of the information, the compression ratio of the engine in the car, the stall speed of the torque converter if it's an automatic car. These are all of the items that your tuner needs to know so he or she can tune your car properly. And without that exact, accurate information, it will most likely raise the cost of your tune, because now your tuner has to figure that out, and that's not his job. You should also have a way of knowing what's going on in the engine. The tunership should be able to see coolant temperature, oil pressure, and an airflow reading. They may want to see more things. Sometimes they may want to see, if it's a turbocharged car, they might want to see crankcase pressure, or they might want to see trans temperature. But I think in most cases, if you can provide them with oil pressure, coolant temperature, an airflow reading, and fuel pressure, that most of the time is accurate for naturally aspirated engines. Like I said, if you have a turbocharger or a supercharged engine, then you're going to need some more things. They are going to need to know the boost pressure at the intake manifold. They might want to know intercooler temperatures before and after the intercooler. They may want to know pan vac to see how healthy the engine is. And all of these things is your responsibility to provide to your tuner. If you want your car to be tuned correctly, you have to give them good information. It's just like an old saying with computer programming. Junk in gets you junk out. So if you give your tuner very limited information and you don't want to pay them extra to find out what the accurate information is, they're going to tune your car most likely on a very safe side as to what they think. And that's probably not going to be optimal. It's probably still going to be leaving a lot of performance on the table, and that's not what you want because you came to them to get the car tuned to its maximum performance level where it's still safe as you intend to drive it. So those are just some quick pointers that we're going to talk about for LS swaps, and a lot of that relates back to just general. So now we're going to talk about general, just shop customer communications. This is very, very important. So whenever a person comes and first talks to me about me building them a car, an engine, or doing an upgrade or anything like that, I tell them to come up with a plan. A plan is very important because it lets me know where I have to get to. And it lets me know exactly what you're expecting when we are done. So I need a plan. If your plan is, I want you to LS swap my car, and when I open this hood, I want it to look like a jury box. But also, I need it to look like a jury box. Also need to be able to beat a scat pack. I don't want to be worried about no 2018 or 2019 scat pack getting on the side of me and me not being able to pull away from it. So if you can tell me those type of things from the beginning, I can give you a rough idea of how much something like that will cost. And I emphasize rough idea. So now it is time for you to take your plan and what I told you it would cost, and for you to have a hard, honest look at your budget and decide, can you actually afford this? And what I also like to tell some people is, you need to treat that budget just like this. If this shop had 15 highly skilled mechanics, and I had a 30,000 square foot warehouse behind me with tons of performance parts readily available, and I would have my 15 guys working on your car 24 hours till it's done, and I told you in 2 weeks the car would be ready, would you have that 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or $100,000 available now? If you don't have that money available now, you probably need to revisit your budget. Because I know a lot of times you're thinking, hey, if I get this nice small block in my car, I'm gonna sell this small block for $5,000, and then that's gonna cover this, or I got some money coming in from here, or I've been working overtime for 6 months, and they say this shit is not gonna stop for another year and a half, so I know I got an extra $1,300 coming in every month. Do not plan on building your car off of what you think is gonna happen. Because a lot of times what happens is the money comes up short. And then when the money comes up short, now we have to change the plan. And that is the worst thing to do when you're building a car, is to change the plan. Because remember, we're buying custom parts for your car to meet your plan. So if we change a part of that plan, that means probably some of this other stuff we bought isn't going to work with what we have to do now. And a prime example of that is, I had a car one time, we were LS swap. The guy originally, he wasn't able to go a full fuel injection system. This is before the Holley Terminator X's came out. It's pretty much when like all you used to have was like a Dominator or a Phytech or something like that. So I quoted him what it would be, and he didn't have anything but an engine. So he told me that was too much. He said, there's another way we can go. I said, we can go carburet it and get the engine in the car. You can have a lot of fun and then come back next year and we'll throw a Dominator. So he said, cool. So we started out doing this project, carbureted LS, which is a pretty cheap swap. So we started. Then Holley came out with Terminator X. Anywhere from $1,000 to maybe say $1,400, you get a fuel injection system. So he saw that. He said, hey, I want to go fuel injection. I said, cool. But what you have to remember, we started out with just an engine. We didn't got a carbureted intake, a 60 box. So we had a carbureted intake, an MSD 6010 box, and it's in the car. But now he wants to go fuel injection. So now we need an intake manifold for fuel injection, which isn't that much. The only sensors he had was an oil pressure sensor, a cam sensor, and a crank sensor. On a fuel injection system, we're gonna run a throttle body. So we were doing a mechanical throttle body. So now you need a throttle position sensor, an IAC motor, and a throttle body. Now remember, we're going fuel injection now. So this thing runs at 58 to 43, or even 60 PSI. So now you need a fuel system that can support that. So now we need a tank, lines, pump, 2 filters, a regulator, fittings. So now this $1,000 ECU that he bought, it's gonna cost him probably another $4 grand and other stuff that he didn't have. That he could be just because he didn't have it. So now we need to put an O2 sensor in the exhaust. You say this is all little stuff, but you're paying someone to do each and every one of these little things. And my labor rate is $100 an hour. So at $100 an hour, hold on one second. Come back, go. I had to talk to my dog for a second. So at $100 an hour, that adds up. You could be $1,000 to $1,500 in fuel system, a $400 intake, a $300 throttle body, a bunch of sensors, an IAC motor, a TPS sensor, a map sensor. You could be another couple $100 in there. Welding a bung and exhaust. Well, the system comes with like your little strap-on bung, but you really probably want to put a real bung in there. So all that stuff adds up. So now his budget is way higher, as well as now he's bought an intake and a 6010 box that he didn't need. Now right now, when we shooting this video right now, carbureted LS intake is solid gold. You can't find it starting at any place. So he would be good if he was right now. But the point I'm trying to make is that when you change your plan, your budget is derailed. And another part about a budget is you got to remember that we're working on 50, sometimes 50-year-old cars, 60-year-old cars, 30-year-old cars. The budget is going to change because something else is probably going to be found wrong. Something else that has to be fixed while you're doing this swap. It could be a couple $100 or $1,000. But you need to be prepared to do that and have it done while it's still at the shop so that work can be executed correctly. Now, when you're adding digital dashes, a Dakota digital dash, a fuel injection system, all of that taxes a wiring system. You have to remember these old cars were built when 70 amp alternators, if it had an alternator, was a big thing. So now you're completely taxing the electrical system in this car if it was perfect. But it's not going to be perfect because it's 50 years old. And over the time, somebody's added an aftermarket stereo and didn't do that correctly. Somebody's added 2 and 3 different alarms because they didn't want nobody to steal my thing. Somebody over the years, the car wouldn't start one time, so they went poking and prodding in all the wires, trying to figure out why it didn't start. So now your wiring system, in a lot of cases in old cars, should be completely redone. But I understand that that's not practical. But you also got to understand is that we have to make it safe. So if your mechanic comes back to you and say, hey, I need to do a couple $100,000 worth of wiring work to this car to make it where it's not going to burn up and I can get the adequate voltage and amperage to all of these high-powered electrical components, you need to dig deep in your pockets and make that happen. So I'm gonna talk about something that used to get me in a lot of trouble in the past. A lot of times, I would have guys come through my door, have 10,000, 15,000, 7,000, or whatever, and what they wanted, you really couldn't get for that type of money. So instead of me just letting that money walk out the door, I would somehow try to chase that money sometime. And that's not a good thing. If you know as a customer that what you want is a lot more than $15,000, If a person tells you that they're going to give it to you for $15,000, you need to run out of that door. Because they're not being honest with you, and you're not being honest with yourself. And what's going to happen is, it's going to take a lot longer for what you want to get completed, if it even is completed. And you're going to be upset. And they're going to be upset with you because they did a lot more work than for what you paid them for. And both of y'all was wrong on both parts. So, another thing I want to talk about is when you choose a shop, if you decided for whatever reason, their reputation, their car, because a friend recommended you, if you decided to go to that shop and get your car repaired, if that place makes recommendations onto how you should get to your goal, you should take their recommendations. And if you think that their recommendations are wrong, then you shouldn't let them work on their car. Because if you come to me and I recommend, say, hey, we use this, 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 and you say, no, I don't want to use that, I want to use this, this, this. If we do decide to move forward with it, and I do decide to do it the exact way you want it to, and there's an issue, first thing I'm going to tell you is, I made a recommendation to you, and you didn't take my recommendation. So what you have is completely on you. So if you trust them enough to work on your car, you need to trust them enough that they know what they're doing and take their recommendations. Another thing I want to talk about is that when you go to a shop and you went there one time and you see the same 7, 8 cars sitting there, you come back a month later, you see the same 7, 8 cars sitting there, you come back a month later, you see the same 7, 8 cars sitting there. And you decide to leave your car and get it worked on, and then upset when the deadline isn't met. Although they told you that they could probably do it, you should have been realistic with yourself. You'd have been there 3 different times and seen no progress on nothing, and you still decided to leave your car because I guess you thought you were special and they were just gonna jump on your shit. Now it might happen, but it's probably not gonna happen. Now if you go to a shop and you see the same 7, 8 cars, but you constantly see progress with those cars, like you come one time, the car wasn't running, and now it's got an engine and trans and it is running, and you see another car, it was the body and frame was separated, now the body and frame is married back together. If you see progress going on, even though it's the same cars there, you should feel all right of dropping your car off there because you see progress coming. I came one time, this car wasn't running, now he able to start the car up for me, and he want me to hear how it sounds. So you probably stand a better chance at being in a place like that. Another point I want to talk about is that changing plans and money not being available stalls out your project. And that might be a reason why a lot of those cars are sitting around there too. My labor rate here is $100 an hour. When you come here to get your car fixed, if we're doing custom work, you're going to pay me all of the part money up front for what we need for parts. And if you don't like that, we're just not going to do it. Because I've learned over time that that is the best way to get the cars done. I need the part money so I can order the parts. So I can order the parts as soon as you get it to me. I don't want to be ordering parts here and there and there and there and there, because what if the corona happened again? Now you're on back order for everything. So no, I want to order the parts and get them in. So how it's going to work, so say if we're doing an LS swap. Say if your swap and everything you want to do work out to be 30 grand. Say if you got $15,000 in parts that we need to buy here because you brought some stuff, you're going to leave me $15,000. Now, if you don't feel comfortable leaving me $15,000, don't leave me your car and the stuff you brought. Take it to somebody else. Because without the part money, I cannot move forward. So after we get your engine and transmission in the car, it's running and starting and everything, I'm going to call you. So now remember, our bill was $30,000. Your parts bill was $15,000. So that meant your labor bill was $15,000. You probably did LS swap, some wheel woods, maybe a mini tub if you got a G-body, some suspension work. So now, hey, I tell you that we got the car running and driving. I'm gonna need a third of my part. A third of my labor. So now, if when I call you and say, hey, the car's running and driving, I still got to do some suspension work. The rear end is done. I'm just waiting on the wheel woods to come in for the front, and then we're gonna hang the control arms, align it, and be done. I need $5,000 because that's a third of my part of my labor money. You say, oh man, I ain't got it right now. Give me a week. I say, well, damn, dog, I got the engine in there, we running and driving. I told you before, when you dropped it off, I was gonna need a third of labor money as soon as this thing is as I'm running and driving. Oh, I got you, brother. I got you, man. I got you. I got you. I shoot it down to you Friday. This Monday. Okay, cool. Friday roll around, I ain't heard from you. I'm probably not gonna call you again. And the reason why I'm not gonna call you again is because I got your car. So if you never come pay me, I'm gonna take this stuff back off your car and sell it. But the main reason why I'm probably not gonna call you is because although your car is in here, I probably got 10 other people that want to get their car in here. And it's gonna be like 3 out of them 10 people, guys that probably stop down here every week or call me every week. And like, dog, you told me 40,000, man. I've been waiting so long. I got the whole 40 ball. I want to come drop it off right now. So I'm gonna remember. Shit, my man's with the black, without a silver Monte Carlo, he called me like 8 times. Say he got all his money, all his parts. This shit's simple. He got the whole 40 ball. He'll just drop it off. So I'm gonna call him. Like, hey, you still want to get that Monte Carlo in here? Yeah. You still got the money? I told you I got the money. I'm gonna drop all of it off to you right now. When can? Shit, come down now. So he gonna come drop his car and his parts off. And he gonna probably give me 40,000. And what's gonna happen? Your car gonna get pushed out. And then in about 3 weeks, you're gonna come down here with the 5,000. Well, you ain't gonna probably even have 5,000. You probably gonna have 4,200. Come down here and be like, damn, dog, why my car outside? I thought you was working on it. Like, I thought we was working on it too. I called you 3 weeks ago, asked you for 5,000. Yeah, I got 4,200 right here. Well, my man dropped off 40,000. And I'm about to get him out of here. Well, how he jumped the line? Because he had his money. So although I fix cars because I love to do it, and I fix old ones because I really love to do it. But I'm gonna tell you right now, if you owe me money and I've done what I'm supposed to do, if somebody come in here and want a brake job or a timing chain or whatever, and they have the money and you ain't kept up your end, your car will quickly get pushed out and put to the side. And then you'll see like, well, my car came in February and he done dropped 4 other cars since mine. Yeah, but every time I call you for money, it's an issue. I mean, we're adults here. I'm not gonna beg no grown man for no money because I could take your car if I felt like it. So don't get in the habit of being stingy with the money. If y'all came to an agreement and it's time for you to make another payment, even if the deadline is late, if he told you, man, the car be running in 6 weeks, and it took him 8 weeks, but you come down there and hear the key, the rear end of the car done, the engine wounded the way you looking to, he can take you for a ride in it, you owe him $5,000, he said he's waiting on the braking system. He probably is waiting on it. Give him the rest of the money you're supposed to pay him at that time. Show him faith that you're going to be able to finish the car. Because remember, everybody that is good has somebody another customer waiting on them. And a lot of these guys, the longer they wait on me, the more money they come up with. So, don't stall out the money. And I'm going to just tell you, like I said it before, if you go to a shop and you don't see no progress on none of the cars that's in there, I'm not talking about just the same cars that's in there, but I mean the same cars that's in there in the exact same position as they were. Every time you come, you probably shouldn't leave your car there. And if you think it could not be the shop's fault, ask the owner, the manager, the reason why. Just straight up, just ask them, like, my man, I came here a month ago, this same car was sitting there. It ain't like you ain't did nothing to this one yet. Like, I want to leave my car, but I ain't seen this one move. Then they'll probably tell you, like, man, the car ain't moved, the guy ain't got no money. So I'm trying to be cool with him. I don't want to take his car, but it's getting to the point, you know, because now it's making me look bad. Or he could just tell you, like, hey, man, I'm still working on it. Now I just got to turn a couple more bolts. You're like, oh, it's just a couple more bolts? Okay. Well, then probably stop back in another 2 weeks or a month and see, did he turn a couple other bolts? Now, if he didn't, sound like he on some bullshit. So it goes both ways. You as a customer have to be realistic about what you want and what you can honestly afford to spend. And a shop owner has to be realistic about what their skill set is able to do and a time frame. And what I mean by a time frame is it's got to be reasonable. So that's all I got to say. I appreciate you guys checking in and watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. We're going to try to get you some more footage up later on this week here. And thank you very much.